Hello friends, it's your boy Jeff here, back with you with another video. This time around, we're going back to my Stephen King reading project, and I've got 3 books to talk about this time because I've been a busy boy. I've been able to do a lot more reading than listening lately, and it's been a while since I've made one of these King videos. So, quick recap, my project, as you may or may not know, is to alternate between revisiting books by Stephen King that I've read before and are well loved, but I probably haven't read them in 30 plus years, mostly, and alternating that with a couple of books that I've not read by him before. And that number is starting to shrink. But once I've completed reading all the King books that I haven't read before, I'm going to substitute Joe Hill books because I've got all of his in hardcover too, and I've only read like 2 of them, or 3. So I'll be alternating with that once the King part concludes. So we're starting off this time with a book that I've read and loved many years ago. It's his 1979 novel, The Dead Zone. It's a 40-year-old book, so I'm not really going to be too concerned with talking about spoilers at this point. I mean, it's been around for so long, plus there's been a movie made of it, plus there was a TV show, which I used to watch, which I didn't really care for all that much after like the first season, but in any case. Basic recap of this, lead character is named Johnny Smith, and he has a horrific car crash, which puts him in a coma for 4.5 years. And when he comes out of that coma and has to rehabilitate his body, he also has the ability, like a precognitive ability to see, not so much the future, kind of the future, but also he can read people by touching them. So if he shakes their hand or whatever, he can get sometimes very powerful visions, which are almost like immersive, where he feels like he's inside the place wherever he's seeing, and other times it's just flashes. And as the book goes on, he assists the police in catching a serial killer, which takes up a good almost over half of this book. And it was interesting. Not so much, it kind of turns from a supernatural into kind of a mystery procedural. And then the last like third of the book, he shakes hands with a presidential candidate, and he has this massively powerful vision of what would happen if he becomes president, and feels like he has to do something about it. So I'll just leave it there. This is one of King's shorter novels. It was only like 350 pages, something like that. So that made it a little nicer instead of having to carry around this brick everywhere I went, which is what I did with this book while I was reading it, because once it gets its hold on you, it doesn't let go until you're done. So I had a hard time putting this down, even though I'd read it before, many years ago. You forget the details. I mean, who's going to remember every single thing, every single word they've read? I just knew that I liked this book. I was very happy to revisit it, and it still delivered. And I haven't done any kind of ranking of King books. I know some of you have asked if I would do like a top 10. While I haven't really approached that thought yet, I would probably put this book probably somewhere in the lower half of the top 10, maybe top 15 of his books. And King's written over 60 of them, so that's got to say something. So, Dead Zone, one of his best, in my opinion. Yeah, if you haven't read this and you think you just know it from the movie or the TV show, get the original source material, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, especially even if you're just a casual King fan. I think you'd enjoy this book. It's very sad too, because Johnny's relationship, which had just been starting to blossom with his girlfriend, ended abruptly, being in a coma for 4 years. So, there's different facets to this book that kind of make it enjoyable, gives the character depth, and makes it sad in the end. So, Dead Zone is one of his best, easily. And from there, we go to a book of his that I had not read before. Joyland is another in his hard case crime series of books. Hard Case Crime series publishes original material and also republishes older crime mystery novels, paperback novels from like the 50s and 60s and 70s, So it kind of mixes in old and new, and you get these old school covers, to make them look like the drugstore paperbacks that they were back then, when they only sold for like a quarter or 35 or 40 cents. This did not sell for 40 cents. I'll just show you the back. This is the layout of Joyland, which is an amusement park in North Carolina, fictional amusement park, of course. And this is also a short book. It was only like 250 pages, something like that. Take away the illustrations, which were full page. And I like this book. I saw a lot of people, especially on Fuego's Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, give lots of praise to this book. So that's what kind of inspired me to make this my next pick. But while I liked it, it fell into the same trap as his other hard case novel, which was called The Colorado Kid. There's no chapter breaks in this book. There's only like a double space between paragraphs. So the book is just one long run on, like, journal entry, if you will, of the main character who's looking back on his time in Joyland and who, what happened there and what he did. Which made it a little tedious, if you're kind of OCD like me. I want to make it to the end of a chapter before I stop. But I couldn't do that with this book, so I just had to pick a place and stop. But that's nothing, that's just my weirdness, so don't even pay attention to that. Story-wise, I liked it. Very heavy on character development, light on plot. And when I said it fell into the same trap as The Colorado Kid, by that I mean, I think once he reached a certain point, I don't know if King had a certain page count that he had to meet to turn this in or not, but I think it feels like he'd gotten far into this story before he realized he had to make it a crime or mystery novel, because this really isn't a crime novel or a mystery novel until the very end. And it's very abrupt. What happens, I won't spoil it for you. This is a newer book. This came out, I think, in 2013. This illustrated version came out in 2015. So it's one of his newer books. Yeah, it just felt like he had to tack on, like, the meat of the story at the end. It was very abrupt, and it was wrapped up very quickly, which drives me crazy. And this is something that's King has done in several other books. And it doesn't really ruin it, but it takes you out of the story. That's what I'm trying to say. It takes you out of the story. So, things are just a little too convenient. The ending is a little too convenient. But it's well written, because it's Stephen King. So there's the bad with the good. I like this better than Colorado Kid, just because I like the characters better and I like the writing better. But story-wise, this should have been longer, or he should have done more with the main plot than he did, which I know he doesn't work that way. He just writes kind of like in a stream of consciousness way. He doesn't use outlines or anything like that. So, um, yeah, I think he writes himself into a corner sometimes and doesn't know how to get out. So things just kind of happen and it's jarring. So I'll just leave it there. Good book. Don't know if I would necessarily read it again, but while I had it, it was a good read. I just kept waiting for something to happen, and events do occur in this book, and don't get me wrong, but when we're talking about like crime elements or mystery elements, that's not until way late in this book. So take that with a grain of salt, just my opinion. Still a decent read. Joyland. It's a hard case crime book by Stephen King. Decent. Glad I read it all in all, but yeah, I probably doubt I'll come back to this one. And then the book I'm currently reading, I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, kind of encompasses both sides of this project because it's a book that I've read before, but it's the comic adaptation of The Stand. And obviously I'd never read the comic version of The Stand. And you can see it's a very thick book, and I'm like 3/4 of the way through. I'll probably finish this in the next day or two. I need both hands to hold this up. It's so heavy. Marvel Comics put this out back, I think, around 2012. And it's 31 issue series. So reading this is like reading a very condensed version of The Stand, especially when you think of the unedited version being like almost 1,200 pages long. So kind of hard to distill it down into 31 issues, but it's very good. The artwork is very, I'm trying to not block the cover too much here. The artwork is very, very nice. And of course, none of the characters look like what I have in my head, but that's okay. It's nice to see someone else's interpretation. This is just the back cover here. Yeah, I think this is Stu. This is Franny, this is Larry. Bring it in closer, you can see kind of what the artists did with their interpretation of the characters. And of course, this is Randall Flagg here on the cover, the Dark Man. So, I love The Stand. This would definitely be in my top 5 of King books. On any given day, it could probably be number 1. So, I was kind of looking forward to this. I still want to read the unedited version again, but that won't be till down the road a ways because that's such a huge book. That's actually the longest book I've ever read in my life. So taking that on again is going to take some time. I got to work myself up to it. But I think almost everyone knows the deal with the story. Super Flu wipes out almost the entire human race. Randall Flagg is the big bad in this story. Yeah, this had to be a tough project for the creators to tackle, trying to adapt this to a comic book, but it's really been enjoyable. And being a comic collector, like I used to be, I don't really read comics anymore, so it's kind of nice to combine the two, to read Stephen King and comics as well. So all in all, this is very enjoyable. I'd probably recommend this if you wanted to read the story, but were kind of intimidated by, a book this thick and trying to work your way through that if you're a fast reader or not. I'm not necessarily that fast of a reader, so this even took me a while to get through, and I'm still not done. So, but I already know how it's going to end, so I figured it was good enough to talk about here. But if you're interested in reading, like I said, a condensed version of the story, this would be a excellent choice. The Marvel Comics adaptation of The Stand. Ugh, and it's heavy. Ugh. From there, I'm thinking of my next book. I think is going to be Doomakey. That's a book of his that I haven't read before. I'm kind of leaning in that direction. That's a fairly large book, so that may take me a while. So it may be a little while before you see another King video. Okay, if you stuck around this long, we're only 15 minutes here, so it's not going to be that long of a video. Everybody, hope you're still enjoying your Thanksgiving weekend. I'm recording this on the Sunday of the Thanksgiving weekend. And yeah, keep reading Stephen King if you are. Or if you haven't checked him out at all, highly recommend you check out some of his books. So, all right, that's going to be it for me. Peace, everyone. I'll talk to you again soon, so take care.